Hash, a song that changed everything. The afternoon sun hung low over the city of Manila, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. In a small neighborhood where houses pressed close together, a boy named Miguel sat on the cracked concrete steps outside his home. He was 12 years old, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that seemed to carry stories far beyond his years. Miguel lived with his mother, Rosa, and his younger sister, Anna, in a tiny house with walls that let in the rain during typhoon season. His father had passed away 3 years ago, and since then, his mother worked 2 jobs just to put rice on the table. She cleaned offices in the early morning hours before the city woke up, then spent her evenings washing dishes at a restaurant downtown. Every day after school, Miguel would come home to an empty house. He would help Anna with her homework, prepare whatever simple meal they could afford, and wait for their mother to return home late at night, her hands red and worn from the day's work. But Miguel never complained. He understood that life had given them a heavy load to carry, and complaining would not make it any lighter. What kept Miguel going was music. He had discovered it by accident one evening when he was 7 years old. The old radio in their house had crackled to life, playing a song with guitars that sounded like they were telling a story. From that moment on, music became his refuge. He would listen to whatever songs the radio offered, memorizing every word, every note, every pause between the verses. His mother had noticed his love for music. On his 10th birthday, despite having barely enough money for food, she had saved for months to buy him a small, second-hand guitar. It had scratches all over its body and 2 strings that never stayed quite in tune, but to Miguel, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. He taught himself to play by watching videos on an old phone his mother had received from her employer, practicing until his fingers hurt and calluses formed on his fingertips. One evening, as Miguel sat strumming his guitar on the steps, his neighbor, an elderly man named Mang Carlos, walked by. Mang Carlos had once been a musician himself, playing in small bars and restaurants before his hands grew too shaky to hold a guitar properly. "You play well, boy," Mang Carlos said, pausing to listen. "You have feeling in your music. That is rare." Miguel looked up, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you, Mang Carlos. I just play what I hear." The old man smiled, his weathered face crinkling around his eyes. "That is the best way to play. From the heart, not from books." He paused, then added, "You know, there is a talent show coming to Manila. A big one. People come from all over the country to audition. They say the winners can change their lives." Miguel's heart quickened, but he quickly pushed the thought away. "Those shows are not for people like me, Mang Carlos. They are for people with training, with nice clothes, with confidence." "Confidence comes from believing in your gift," the old man replied. "And you, Miguel, you have a gift. I can hear it every evening when you play." That night, Miguel could not sleep. He thought about what Mang Carlos had said. He thought about his mother's tired face when she came home each night. He thought about Anna, who deserved new school supplies instead of the donated ones with other children's names crossed out. He thought about the leaking roof and the empty refrigerator and all the things that music could never fix. But then he thought about how music made him feel. How it transported him to a place where poverty did not exist, where his father was still alive, where his mother could rest. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, music could do something more. The next morning, Miguel told his mother about the audition. Rosa's eyes filled with concern. "Miguel, my son, I do not want you to be disappointed. These shows, they choose people who look a certain way, who have expensive instruments, who have been trained by professionals." "I know, Mama," Miguel said quietly. "But I want to try. Just once. I want to sing for Papa. For you. For all of us." Rosa looked at her son, at the determination in his young face, and her heart broke and swelled at the same time. She pulled him into an embrace. "Then you will go," she whispered. "And you will be magnificent." The day of the audition arrived. Miguel wore his only good shirt, which his mother had washed and ironed the night before. He carried his scratched guitar in a cloth bag, his hands trembling slightly as they walked to the audition venue. The building was enormous, with bright lights and cameras everywhere. People rushed around with clipboards and headsets, looking important and busy. Miguel registered at a long table where a woman with perfect makeup barely looked at him as she handed him a number. Number 543. He would be waiting a long time. Hours passed. Miguel sat in a waiting area filled with other hopeful performers. Some had elaborate costumes. Others practiced vocal exercises that sounded like entire operas. He felt small and out of place, his simple shirt and worn guitar suddenly seeming foolish. "Maybe we should go home," he whispered to his mother. Rosa took his hand. "You came here to sing, Miguel. So sing. Not for them, not for the cameras. Sing for yourself. Sing like you do on our front steps, when the world is quiet and the music is just yours." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they called his number. Miguel walked onto the stage, and suddenly everything became too real. The stage was huge, stretching out before him like an ocean. Bright lights blazed down, making it hard to see. In front of him sat 4 judges behind a long desk, their faces neutral, waiting. "Hello," said one of the judges, a woman with kind eyes named Sarah. "What is your name?" "Miguel," he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "And what will you be singing for us today, Miguel?" Another judge asked. His name was David, and he had a warm smile. Miguel took a breath. "I will sing, Hotel California," he said. It was the song that had first made him fall in love with music, the song he had listened to 1,000 times, the song that felt like it contained all the longing and hope he carried in his heart. A judge named Rebecca raised her eyebrows. "That is a difficult song, especially for someone so young. Are you sure?" Miguel nodded. He thought of his father, who used to whistle melodies while he worked. He thought of his mother's hands, cracked and dry from washing dishes. He thought of Anna, who deserved more than this life had given her. He positioned his fingers on the guitar strings. His hands had stopped shaking. In that moment, everything else fell away. The cameras, the judges, the bright lights, none of it mattered. There was only the music. He began to play. The familiar chords filled the huge theater, and then he began to sing. His voice was not perfect. It cracked slightly on some of the higher notes. But it carried something that perfection could never capture. It carried truth. It carried struggle. It carried hope that refused to die despite everything trying to kill it. As he sang about a place you can check out of but never leave, the judges leaned forward. Sarah's eyes began to glisten. David put his hand over his heart. Rebecca stopped writing notes and simply listened. Miguel closed his eyes and sang the way he sang on his front steps. When the evening air was cool and the world felt infinite, he sang for every child who went to bed hungry. For every mother who worked until her body ached. For every dream that seemed impossible but refused to disappear. When he finished, silence filled the theater. Miguel opened his eyes, suddenly afraid. Had he done something wrong? Then Sarah stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Miguel," she said, her voice breaking, "that was the most beautiful thing I have heard in 20 years of judging this show." David was crying too. "You did not just sing that song. You lived it. You made us feel every word." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "I have never hit this button before," she said, her hand hovering over a large golden button in front of her. "I was always waiting for the right moment. This is that moment." She slammed her hand down on the button. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. Music blared from speakers. The audience, which Miguel had not even realized was there, erupted in cheers and applause. Miguel stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. His mother rushed onto the stage, pulling him into her arms, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. The golden buzzer meant automatic advancement to the finals. It meant opportunity. It meant hope. But more than that, it meant that Miguel had been heard. His voice, which he had thought was too small, too ordinary, too poor to matter, had reached across the void and touched something real in people's hearts. That evening, back in their small house with the leaking roof, Miguel sat on the front steps with his guitar. Mang Carlos walked by and stopped, smiling. "I heard what happened," the old man said. "The whole neighborhood is talking about it." Miguel looked up at him. "Mang Carlos, do you think this will really change things?" The old man sat down beside him. "Things are already changed, Miguel. Not because of money or fame that may or may not come. But because you proved something important today. You proved that beauty can come from broken places. That truth is more powerful than perfection. And that the smallest voice, when it speaks from the heart, can make the whole world stop and listen." Miguel looked out at the street where he had grown up, at the houses pressed close together, at the sunset painting everything gold. His guitar rested against his chest, and for the first time in his life, he felt that maybe, just maybe, everything would be alright. The music had always been there, waiting. He just had to be brave enough to let it out.